us all about yourself and what is this presentation going to be about today?
So I am a bilingual Mandarin speaking Asian mobile industry, career Asian mobile industry specialist. I've lived half of my life and career in Asia, China, Taiwan, and Singapore, 18 plus years. And I've been jump shooting Asia all of that time as well. And what I do is I bring cutting edge technologies, mostly mobile technologies, in the smart card and semiconductor space into Asia to be design in wins to be sold. And all that technology is very, very important because it comes back in the ICT sector. It comes back as consumer electronic products. And I started my career in Taiwan learning Mandarin, and basically I use all of my abilities and skills to help Western companies sell into Asia. And I heard a lot of hype recently about the iPhone could never be made in America, and the iPhone is only going to be made in China. And I said, well, wait a minute. In 2015, I gave a presentation mentioning how all these Western companies were sick of protectionism and techno-nationalism coming out of China, and they were going to do something about it. And quite honestly, it has been at least a decade that all these companies realized that they need to shift supply chains, and they have been shifting chains to Southeast Asia from China because it's not just much easier to move it from, let's
Sure.
say, Shenzhen or Shanghai to Ho Chi Minh or even to India, maybe not so much India because of their tariffs. So
Right.
I realized that all this hype about everything is always going to be made in China, that's just not correct because I was in Taiwan when Taiwan made all the computers.
Yeah.
Uh, and then Taiwan was starting to do the cell phones, not smartphones, but feature phones.
Right.
And Taiwan decided to move some of that production into China long before Apple, by the way, long before Apple,
Oh, yeah,
Taiwan.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think back to when we got to know each other back when I was, doing Windows Mobile and Windows Phone at Microsoft. And I remember our number one OEM before everything else got big was HTC in Taiwan.
Yes. Yes. And I was so fortunate to get to know Chair Wong, who
Yeah,
is the founder. She's a fantastic lady. Um,
absolutely. She's great.
yeah, I met her last time. I met her a few times. I met her years and years ago when I was when I was studying Mandarin and working in Taiwan. And then I met her when HTC was quite famous. In fact, I met her when I was involved in a small Half Moon Bay antenna startup, and
Oh,
we were pitching for the first for the first HTC candy bar phone that was going to Orange. Now, at the same time, my company was involved with Sendo for
yeah.
the same antenna that they were, the relationship with Microsoft. We
Yeah.
won't go any deeper
We all
into
remember what happened with Sendo. Yeah. Ugh, ouch.
uh, not my business, but the key point is I was at HTC's office one day and I was looking at the Sendo phone, which I had a sample of, and I was looking at the HTC phone. I said, wait a minute, these are exactly the same. And then, of course, Orange France was the company. So I realized that Apple iPhone can be built in the West. It can also be built in India, but right now, actually, no, it's still going to be made in China. But I can tell you that Apple and a bunch of other companies, this is not 2, 3 years down the making. They have been looking at moving supply chains. And I feel that with Trump in power and his whole initiative to bring TSMC here, actually, he didn't start this. This was started at least a decade ago.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, one of the places they thought about putting TSMC's fab was Washington State, obviously
Right.
because they have a fab. They've got a packaging facility, as we mentioned, in Camas, Washington. So I thought to myself, why don't I put something compelling together to explain that, in my humble opinion, based on my observations and the fact that I lived in Arizona one full year working for Freescale Semiconductor, I believe that the United States is pushing to bring manufacturing to Texas and to Arizona. And it's not that the American government is pushing it. I think the local state authorities in Arizona, the city of Phoenix, and I also think Richardson, Texas. We have semiconductor manufacturing going on in those places now, and
Yeah.
I think it's only going to grow. And I feel that because of NAFTA or the what is it, the America Free Trade
Oh, you're right.
the
There's the new version of
USM
NAFTA. Yeah.
USMCA. They call it USMCA. I believe
Right.
because of that, I've tried to put together information that shows not only is this possible to happen, I believe that the reason for TSMC's success in Arizona, and let's say Intel's kind of wavering opportunities, are that TSMC is really able to think out of the box. And so my presentation is called, Can the iPhone be produced in North America? And my answer is yes. So let me move on. Okay, here we go. They're going to want that. Again, I'm the rainmaker for the AI chip supply chain and business growth, and this is my career. In Asia, I've been doing this for decades, and living and working there. Now, I started to look at the labor costs between China and India because it was actually me in 2015 I was invited by David Reed, who was the China chair at the Albert School of Business and Economics. I taught there 1 year, by the way, from 2007 until 2008. I taught globalization at Seattle University.
Okay.
Well, I'm not a teacher. My wife thought it was prestigious. I said, honey, that you don't make money as a teacher in America.
It's too
So
bad. It's fun to be a teacher, though. I love it.
I enjoyed the 1 year, but then after that I got my gig in China with Gemalto.
Sure.
Anyway, so basically I realized that the iPhone could be made in America. And when I talk globalization, I was teaching people just what globalization was all about. And when we fast forward, it seems to me that American companies have been looking to do this. They want to do this. They want to reshore. And TSMC has reshored, and TSMC is very savvy. And I got wind of them putting, as I mentioned, a desalination or working with an Israeli company, because the Israelis have this technology,
Oh,
to build
absolutely.
to
Yeah.
build a desalination plant in the Sea of Cortez. I think it's called Solana, which is a part of Mexico closest to the Sea of Cortez. When I
Okay.
worked at Scale Semiconductor, I used to go down there, a nice fishing village with nice beaches. Anyway, I feel that TSMC is not only a semiconductor chip manufacturer, as I said, they could be a water distribution company because if they own the water and they bring it in through the desert back up to Washington, sorry, back up to Arizona, bingo, they could even supply for Intel. Why didn't Intel think of that?
No, that's a
Why
good
did
point. Intel's been in the, what are they, in Chandler and areas
they're in
around?
Chandler? They've got a monster facility in Chandler. I used to visit friends at Intel in Chandler.
Right.
Monster facility.
Yeah.
So TSMC is located north of Scottsdale,
Okay.
and, north of Sunrise.
Okay.
They have their own facility, and land is cheap in the
It
desert. It just
is. You're
is.
right.
So now I thought about China and India
Yeah.
because I gave that presentation in 2015 at Albert School. And I really thought that everything that I saw was that Apple would move through Foxconn and Hong Hai, Apple would move manufacturing to India. I've since come under the opinion that India is not ready, number one. India is a terrible place for import and re-export because of all of the British system of taxation,
Okay.
which is called, it's just a problem in India.
Yeah.
Um, so if they manufacture,
In India, the rest of the world would be made in China. I'm going to take this phone and put it by the window.
okay,
Okay. All right. We'll
so
start again. Here we go. I
so
think,
so so here's the most important thing. China's protectionism and techno-nationalism is only a result of the fact that they can leverage Western manufacturers because they have all the technology now. Who's to say that won't happen in Vietnam and that won't happen in India? Who's to say that it won't? I'm telling you, it will.
yeah. Eventually, I think it will. Yeah.
I mean, Look, I was in China when before the Apple iPhone, and then when the iPhone just got released and able to be sold in China, those things were worth more than gold. And I had one, and people were asking to buy it off me. I mean,
Wow, that's cool.
and then I also had a BlackBerry, and that's another unfortunate failure
Such a
of
sad story.
yeah. But in China, it was even sadder. So anyway, back to the point
Yeah,
here. This is the first slide talking about India and China and the production of the iPhone 15 because they are producing the iPhone 15 in India, but under very, very small yield, number one. But China has all of this technology in Zhengzhou, but it's really not, it's actually really not China that has this technology. It's Foxconn. People fail to realize it's not China that has this technology. It's Foxconn, Foxconn's quote unquote machinery, which is actually owned by Apple, and then Foxconn's ability to manipulate and move all these chess pieces around Southeast Asia, which is what they want to do if China just puts squeezes them tightly.
yeah,
So
right.
it's all about, for Apple, it's all about removing the leverage from a country to blackmail you. That's what
Yeah,
it's all about.
okay.
So let me move forward to the next slide. So now I talk a little bit about production in Mexico for the iPhone 15. I focused on the iPhone 15. The bill of materials, again, we talked about these things. We talked about the components. The most important thing is the CPU, obviously, but then the display. And then, believe it or not, RAM is important, although they don't I don't discuss it here enough. I will consider adding an additional slide. And the reason for that is I have been following Micron. As you know, Micron there are only three companies in the world that really make DRAM and NAND memory technologies. Three major companies. That's Micron, SK Hynix, and Samsung. And unfortunately, Micron was involved in an infringement case in Taiwan by Taiwanese engineers who they basically drank the Kool-Aid from China, saying, we're going to give you all this if you just transfer technology to China. And unfortunately, that's a real case, which is a black eye on Taiwan, because Taiwan companies are smart. They realize I have nothing to gain by giving the technology away to China, or at least the companies know that, but individual employees can be corrupted, and that's kind of
Right,
what happened. That's kind
right.
of what happened with Micron. So
Sure.
what's happened is Micron has decided to reshore. 60% of their manufacturing is now going to be reshored to, I think, New York and some of it to Boise, Idaho. Did you know that Micron has more RAM patents than any other country or company in the world?
I had no
So
idea. Wow.
absolutely, absolutely. I met them at the CES show, and I tried to tell them, you know, well, anyway, I chatted with them. Um, so I believe that Micron is reshoring because of the bad instance or situation they had, which is they trusted Taiwan because why not? Taiwan, TSMC, all these companies,
Yeah,
they produce their ODMs. They're not OEMs. They're ODMs. So they design and they want to protect the technology.
right.
All right. So the bill of material we talked about, the geopolitical and supply chain implications. Well, we all know that in China, you've got these tariffs going on with Trump administration. With India, actually, not so much of an issue geopolitical, except that India and China are fierce rivals, and India will not allow any Chinese apps into India. That,
Interesting.
that's a problem.
Yeah. Wow.
That's the problem. If you have the iPhone,
Right.
China has WeChat, which is a very nice, super app.
Yes, it is.
Um, but they can't use that in India.
Interesting.
Mexico, you have almost zero geopolitical issues. You have 2 days, 2 to 5 days when you want to send goods, and zero tariffs. And so, yes, Mexico is officially a place where I believe all these Western companies are looking to maybe outsource some manufacturing to because that's what the United States wants. They want reshoring, build
Right.
America. back, build back America great, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, blah.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think Mexico makes perfect sense. You got a great workforce down there. So I guess, are you thinking it's just going to require investment by some of these big companies to
It's
build?
already it's already happening.
Okay.
It's actually already happening. And so I don't understand why some of these authors who write these books say, "Oh, you can never come back to the United States." Listen, I was here when the border area were making Motorola smartphones in the border. They were Motorola
Wow.
Mobility was producing some of their smartphones, or I think they were smartphones, might have been feature phones
Yeah.
on the border. And so it's not like it can't be done. It was done. I think it can be done again. I think the importance for the United States, for Canada, and for Mexico to realize that they need to do this. I think it's an ultimate consensus that they need to do this, and I think that they will do this. Getting back to what I look here is the final estimate costs. So $6 to $8 per unit, labor and overhead, $4 to $6 in India, but India cannot ramp up like China. China can just
Right.
make them so efficiently, and
Yeah.
Mexico is going to take time. Um, but I believe that me and you discussing this topic, we're way behind what all the movers and shakers are actually doing now. So it's not like this is just a premise. This is just an analysis.
Right.
There's much more going on, and I'm going to try to prove that.
Yeah.
Um,
And
now,
and Apple's been getting pressure. Certainly getting pressure by the Trump administration to do something like that.
well, there's more. There's more that few people know about.
Okay.
It's about AI. It's
Yeah.
about
And
AI.
if you go back in time, I remember, I mean, and it probably happens at every time at every Apple shareholder meeting, but I remember way back in the past, someone's raising their hand, always asking Tim Cook, when can you start making the iPhone in the United States? And he would say things like, well, if you don't mind paying double for it or paying $3,500 for it, we'll
Yeah,
start right away.
that's only because Tim invested almost the crown's jewels in China for Apple, and that was a mistake because in 2010 or let's see, 2009, I gave a presentation to the American Chamber of Commerce in Beijing called Shanjiaiji, the rise of the Shanjiaiji. Now, Shanjai means mountain bandit, Ji means cell phone or machine.
Okay.
I gave that presentation to the American Chamber of Commerce in Beijing in late 2009, might have been early 2010. It's up on YouTube, you can see it. And I predicted, and because in the room were Motorola, BlackBerry, Samsung, Nokia. They were all in the room, and I told them their business model is dead. They are going to die in China. You could feel the air in the room. It was that thick, and you could see the temper rising. I said, it doesn't matter. In a place called Huaqiangbei in Shenzhen, they're already producing these feature phones and with Google Android operating system and MediaTek's chip, they're already counterfeiting the Nokia name, the Motorola name, and the Samsung name, and putting these names from Shenzhen and exporting them to developing world markets. And I said, your market is dead and gone. And they disputed, no, no, we know what we're doing. I said, you do not know what you're doing. I led an investigation because my job was promoting mobile payments and security.
Yeah.
And I saw in Shenzhen how they were reproducing counterfeit these three Samsung, Nokia, and Motorola. They were reproducing the phones using Google Android operating system and MediaTek's just in time, very low cost manufacturing process to build these phones, and they flooded them, and basically people were buying all these counterfeit phones, and then they
Right.
thought they were buying the real thing, and then Nokia, Motorola, and Samsung, Sony Ericsson was also there, and I said, you know, your future is bleak. I said you need to do something about this. They never did.
Wow.
They're all almost all gone. If Samsung's still around, They moved the production to out of China into Vietnam, which was a very smart move for now, anyway. So getting back to why I believe that these supply chains move back and forth, and there's no reason why they can't move to the United States. So when I look at the pro, reshoring from a logistics standpoint, it's obvious. From avoiding China tariffs, it's obvious. We don't have these issues if you're making in the United States. The labor rates, faster time to market. Obviously, you're in North America, and and we talked about this before. There are more Americans who speak Spanish, especially in New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona, even Southern California. There are more Americans who speak Spanish than there are people like me who are bilingual in Mandarin. This is a fact. This is a key point as well.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good
Now,
point.
I just list also because of the USMC labor and trade framework. You see, Foxconn has been producing Pegatron, Flextronics, or
Hmm.
Flex and Jabal, they've all been producing in these border regions for a number of years. This is not new concept. Let me move on. So now, new supply chain model overview. This is what I see as being a very, very interesting solution. Of course, TSMC, they have their new fab in Phoenix, northern Phoenix, Arizona. They already have the first yield, which was more successful than their yields in Taiwan. Hallelujah. I tell you, Taiwanese like Phoenix. Okay.
That's great. That's
I
great.
said this. You might have heard me say Phoenix will become little Taipei or little Hsinchu. Hsinchu is where TSMC has their fab. It's where most companies have their semiconductor business. Now NAND and DRAM memory, as I said, Micron is moving that to actually New York, but also some of it to Boise, Idaho. So less exposure for the CPU. That's the most important, and then the memory is also important.
Right.
Now, so the estimated cost impact for the Mexican border, I show if you were to produce it in the United States, what the cost would be if you were to use American chips. And by the way, China's not stupid. They also know this. My
Yes.
prediction is mainland Chinese companies will put R&D in Phoenix or in Texas. And I know that is going to happen because I see it already. I see it already. The Chinese are very pragmatic people
Yeah.
that you would say, well, we have it made in China. No, Chinese people are going all over the world to invest where it makes sense. They will come and set up in Phoenix, in my humble opinion,
Okay.
if they haven't already. So now, strategic and geopolitical issues. You've got risk. You've got fast time to market issues. These are benefits.
Right.
Trade efficiency, IP protection. That's the most important thing.
Yes.
The challenges are there and they're real for ramping up. But that's less of an issue in with TSMC because TSMC is up and running and they're building 3 more fabs in Arizona. Um, and high fabrication costs. U.S. wafers cost 20 or 30% more. Guess what? Where are those wafers actually coming from? Japan.
Ah.
So I believe those costs could be reduced. And where does silicon come from? Sand.
Man.
Who has more sand? The
Arizona.
desert. So yeah, skilled labor shortages, Mexico for sure. That's why your Carl Weaver would love to go and work down in Phoenix, Arizona, and help one of these savvy companies to help build this stuff. One day, I did work down there before. Who knows? Now, this is kind of my summary,
Okay.
which is the North American iPhone vision. So, what is the bottom line? If Apple is using TSMC already, but if Apple used TSMC, Arizona, and Micron, and the Mexican border to do the assembly, then we're talking about the ability to compete with China and India for manufacturing. And who's going to love that? Actually, all of North America. The Canadians still sell Apple some certain things. Mexico doesn't really sell Apple anything, but Mexico would love that labor
Oh yeah.
advantage to produce.
Yeah.
And what are the key takeaways? The CPU and the memory costs are higher in Mexico, US model due to fabrication, but that will go down. They just started this year to manufacture in Phoenix. Logistics and tariffs, that's absolutely going to drop. Final assembly, it's slightly cheaper in Mexico than China.
Okay.
Um, but India is cheaper than China. But there's no way that China is going to be cheaper than Mexico. But I feel that the key points here that I've kind of noted are very important, which is strong U.S. control of key tech infrastructure, slightly higher per unit, but it's offset by logistics. You don't have to send containers of iPhones back to America.
Right.
You don't have to send components from all. By the way, there are 1,000 components in the iPhone, and they're from all over the world. It isn't just China supply chain. China has a big supply chain, but it isn't just China.
Right.
Um, the iPhone will reach the customer in 2 to 4 days. Shorter freight, low carbon emissions for all of those people involved. Now, I want to touch on the water issue in Phoenix. Can build this desalination plant. They will build an additional revenue generator. But I also feel that companies will be putting solar farms in Arizona to augment the need for more power. What
Right.
does a semiconductor fab need? Power, water,
Yeah.
so-called energy. Where can that be done efficiently? Arizona, New Mexico, maybe some parts of Texas. So um,
Right.
you're looking at the capability of huge competitive advantages. And by the way, if I can come up with this data and analysis, you think Apple cannot? Apple is a very
True.
sophisticated company. They know what they're doing. My guess is Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, um, and Meta will all need to put major offices in Phoenix because they will want to tap the hardware supply chain for all of their AI software algorithms. They absolutely will put offices in Phoenix. What they will discover is TSMC has a 5-year wait list to take certain
Right.
projects. So
Good
it's all
point.
about we say guanxi, it's all about your connections with TSMC. But if you're in TSMC in Arizona, which will be staffed by Americans, it's not all Taiwanese working there, by the way. The CEO is technically is an American. You're looking now at the ability for America to really scale up. And by the way, more Taiwanese will come and set up there. By the way, more mainland Chinese will come and set up there. The Japanese will come there. The South Koreans have kind of decided to go to Texas.
Right.
Samsung has decided to
Yeah. In
go to
Austin.
Texas,
Yeah.
but you can see, in Austin, you can see very clearly that there's also one thing that I forgot to mention. I think we're kind of running out of time here, but this is very important. Masayoshi Son, he owns
Yeah.
SoftBank. He also owns ARM, and we never mentioned about one of my former companies, ARM. He also still owns ARM. Remember how NVIDIA tried to buy ARM,
I
and
do. Yeah.
The Chinese government said hell no, because the Chinese government knows that ARM is very powerful, and that's why they've been trying to use risk architecture to kind of replace ARM. Nobody's replacing ARM. So Masa-san, as we call him, is
Yeah.
trying to invest $1 trillion AI and robotics industry with TSMC in cooperation in Arizona. You tell me that nobody's looking at Arizona as the next big manufacturing hub. I'll tell you, they are.
They
They
are.
are.
I agree. You're absolutely right.
And
Wow.
so that's kind of my summary here. And who am I? Newport Technologies is my public speaking vehicle and has been since 1999. When I have these thought leadership moments. My presentation, Can the Apple iPhone be produced in North America? According to today's presentation, the slides, absolutely it can happen, especially the assembly sites along the Mexican border, the Mexican Maquiladoras in Sonora, that's Nogales, or Tamaulipas, Reynosa. Sorry for the translation there. That is where I think due to the USMCA compliant regulations, zero tariffs will be something very attractive for manufacturers along the border to produce the iPhone.